Recently, Techland showcased a new demo for Dying Light the Beast at Gamescom, and I've been able to actually play it. Today I'm going to go over my initial thoughts on my first 2-hour playthrough. Special thanks to Techland for giving me access to this demo. I'm excited to do this review from the perspective of someone who has played through the first game multiple times and has over 1,000 hours in the second game. The first thing I will say is that it does feel very similar to Dying Light 2, but whether or not that's a good thing is up to you. To me, it feels like this is what the previous game should have been. The UI is very close to Dying Light 2, but with a cleaner look. Things are placed better on the screen, and it just enhances the experience a bit more. Not by much, but definitely an improvement. This doesn't just apply to the HUD either. The menus look better and more polished, but they are still basically the same with the same layout. Now let's get into the parkour. Most of the time it feels faster and more fluid when you're sprinting through the streets and while running past zombies. However, there's a big problem that I have. When you go to climb anything, it completely kills your momentum and Kyle moves like a snail, especially when getting to the top of whatever you're trying to climb. I understand that this may change with different skills and levels later in the game, and the fact that the beast mode makes you do everything better, but it took me out of the experience a bit, especially when running away from volatiles at night. Like I said though, when you're doing any other parkour, it feels great and way better than what Dying Light 2 was able to do. For the combat, it felt exactly the same as the previous game in my opinion. This is not necessarily bad, but if you didn't like the combat in Dying Light 2, you may not like this one either. One big difference is the way that crits pop. In Dying Light 2, they would go off like crazy, but they seem to be harder to achieve in the Beast. It's possible that this was changed to make the game not as easy, but that's one of my favorite things about weapon mods is the ability for them to go off as often as possible. This leads into talking about the enemies, and there's some good and some bad. Starting with the good, even though there are not a ton of zombies all packed in, the town you're in has very narrow streets and alleyways, so only a few zombies can feel like a lot. This is intensified with the fact that you can't just one-shot them, at least early in the game, so you can very easily get surrounded and have a hard time fighting. This is where the idea of running away from something that you can't handle really comes into play. Now let's talk about the not so good aspects of the enemies. First, zombies grab you way too often. It feels like every time I would push one away, another one would grab me. This happened in Dying Light 2 as well, and Techland was able to get it stabilized, so for the Beast they really need to do the same thing. Next, the zombies feel like damage sponges and can take a lot before going down, and that's just the normal zombies. To me, these don't make a game more challenging, it makes it more tedious. Granted, I played on the normal difficulty called survival, but there is an easy mode and a hard mode called story and brutal respectively, so it may be different on a lower setting. One aspect that a lot of people had an issue with in Dying Light 2 was the night experience at launch. It was nothing like the first game until Techland made several updates to correct that. Nighttime in the Beast feels much better, but still not as creepy as the first game. I didn't have a chance to explore the woods during my initial playthrough, but running through the city there are a ton of volatiles which will spot you very easily and start to chase. If you use your normal running, then they will catch up to you, however if you use dash and wall running, they can easily be avoided. I never fought any of the volatiles out in the open because I know I would die if I did, but that doesn't mean I didn't fight any. I like to get their attention and start a chase, then lead them back to the main safe house and stand in the UV lights. This allowed me to pop out and get some hits in while dodging their attacks. The most frustrating thing about fighting them though is when they get low on health, they figure out that fighting you is a bad idea and run away. I had to chase down multiple volatiles in order to finish them off, although the idea of this crazy powerful monster running away from you is kind of funny. The biggest challenge of the night experience is not what's hiding in the darkness, but the darkness itself. Without your flashlight on, it is basically pitch black, so keeping it on at all times is a must. When you get into the trucks, you have the option to drive in either first or third person with a single button press, which is pretty nice. I personally prefer the third person view, but both worked great. One issue I had going into the Beast is that I was afraid the trucks would be like the ones in Dead Island and Dead Island Riptide, which were terrible to drive. I was very pleasantly surprised with how well the vehicles handled, so my fears were gone. Every time you hit a zombie, your truck will take more damage and you will use fuel as you're driving. However, there looks to be a repair kit of some kind that will let you fix up the trucks and you can get fuel from gas stations. I didn't find either of them in my time playing, but it's nice to know that they're there. The driving experience at night is much different than during the day and honestly really fun. You have headlights so you can see where you're going, but the vehicles also come equipped with a rechargeable UV light that can stun zombies, allowing you to run them over. Even though the streets were narrow, I didn't feel like there was no room to drive, so I like that the vehicle can pretty much take you anywhere you want to go. Now let's get into the side quest that I got to play. Without any major spoilers, which this quest has no effect on the main story, you're trying to track down a group of survivors that went looking for supplies and have not returned. This leads to a multi-part quest that has you visiting several locations fighting both humans and zombies. As I mentioned, you do explore some of the map during the quest, so let's talk about the size of the map and the beast. Techland has said that the map is roughly the same size as the central loop in Dying Light 2. When you look at the map screen, it's decently sized, and I could see that being the case. It may feel smaller due to the different traversal methods used in the Beast versus Dying Light 2, but it still felt like there was a lot packed into a smaller space, and not in a bad way. There are dark zones everywhere, and even though they're the same as the Forsaken stores in the previous game, from what I came across at least, I was surprised to see what was inside. One that I went in had a volatile and a straitjacket, which was cool to see. I took it down with an SMG, so I didn't experience what its attacks were going to be, but it was nice to see some variations from what I was used to. During the stream that I had earlier today, I figured out that those are actually the redesigned howlers for the game, and I really like the change they made. Also all over the map are the convoys, which is where you can get more ammo, and unlike the convoys in Dying Light 2, you don't need a lockpick to open the vehicles. You need to find a key card on one of the zombies. I like this approach better since having to go into the lockpicking minigame is not always the most fun thing to do. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the gore and brutality in the game. As you can see with the footage, there really isn't any being shown. That's because for recording purposes I turned it down since I personally don't care too much for it. However, if that's something you're looking for, then you will definitely not be disappointed with the Beast. I like that they kept this feature from Dying Light 2 as it helps channels like mine and also people who don't want to see what everything looks like on the inside, but I like that it's there for those that want it. There is a lot more to talk about, but I'll save that for another video. Overall, I've enjoyed the demo and I feel like the Beast is going to be really fun when it releases. Yes, it does have some issues and feels very much like Dying Light 2, but that didn't take away from me enjoying the game. If you want to see more about the Beast as well as other content, then make sure to like and subscribe and check out my other socials linked in the description to not miss out on anything. Thanks for watching. See you next time.